Yo, what is going on, guys? Strokefish back here today after a long hiatus to talk about a thing that I have been kind of thinking about, and I might be shooting myself in the foot here because I'm going to be talking about, if you can tell by the title, why Urshifu Single Strike is ban worthy in Draft League format. Now, for those of you who don't know, I don't know who's going to be watching this video, but this is basically for people in the Draft League community for Pokemon battling. Essentially, you draft a certain amount of Pokemon, and you have a certain amount of points, and each Pokemon, based on their viability, is denoted a point value. So something like a very good Pokemon such as Urshifu would be more points than, say, a Probopass, which would be very, very low points, and just kind of like there. So it usually has some correlation with the tiers in Smogon, if you've heard of those before. And we're going to get into a lot of that. But basically, I'm here to tell you why I believe Urshifu is ban worthy in Draft League format. Now, obviously, there is a lot of debate over some Pokemon. Some people think that certain Pokemon are ban worthy. It's more so how many points they should be assigned is usually the argument. But for this video in particular, I'm going to be talking about Urshifu. Now, a lot of people in at least Smogon OU would probably agree that Urshifu should be banned. It is extremely like I played a lot of OU in the past few days, just because I have felt the urge to ladder. I've played a lot of tiers in the past few days, but I was playing OU and I made an Urshifu team. Now it was not very good. I will be 100% honest. It had like Magearna, like Moltres, Zapdos, Spectrier, and I forget what the last. It had like Nidoking at some point. I had to like change some stuff around because it was really bad, and then like Lando T. But what it would come down to a lot would be the end game, where I would literally have my Urshifu and maybe another Mon versus four Mons. And I cannot tell the amount of times I have gotten out of situations where I was playing very badly, and I would literally have this Mon just 1v1 four Mons on the other person's team. Now, that, in my opinion, is a problem. Now, obviously, yes, if you play well and you put yourself in a position to do that, then that's the thing. But the problem is, Urshifu has it comes down to one move, and that's this Wicked Blow. Now, obviously, it has other good factors about it, but I don't know why this isn't working. But Wicked Blow is really the one move that I think just completely breaks his Pokemon. This move has zero switch-ins, and the ones that do switch into it do not switch in well to other moves. So you may be like, oh, um, I'm going to get over a lot of points, but let's go over the first point. Basically, oh, you can just switch in your, like, quote-unquote check, right? In OU, you don't really have a designated check to every single Pokemon because there's so many Pokemon you can bring, like there's so many different options. So you just bring the standard stuff, you bring certain sets that fit your team, but not so to counter certain Pokemon. Whereas in Draft League format, you bring teams that counter certain Pokemon. Now, on a Draft League team, I see an Urshifu. Okay, maybe I run like 6 Rocky Helmet Mons. Well, that might do the trick, but there's ways around that. So it's like, yeah, one person can counter your team, like the other person can counter Urshifu, but that doesn't mean the Urshifu player has to necessarily run a certain set. Now, there's certain sets I think are extremely viable, and I think are a lot more viable than other stuff, and we'll go over those. Um, but basically, the main point is Wicked Blow. Now, say I'll go over my last team, for example. Last season I had a pretty solid team, I would say, and I actually had a really I was pretty good against Urshifu. Like I wasn't great, but I had things like, say, a Moongus. Now I have a Mandibuzz calc here, but that's another example we'll get to in a sec. But basically a Moongus, right? This is an adamant light for Urshifu. Let's just go like Black Glasses because that's a common set in OU. Black Glasses Wicked Blow. A max HP, max defense Amoonguss is 100% dying to this, no matter what. Black Sludge, no rocks up, it's always dying. So I basically had to play around this. Like I was like, okay, how do I beat Mon that just at least two it kills my entire defensive core and basically would OHKO my whole team. The OU bulk up set is, in my opinion, the best set on Urshifu because not only is it fast enough to outspeed basically everything that's defensive enough to take a hit is it can bulk up on those mons, and then when you go into your offensive mon to take it out, Sucker Punch. Now, there aren't enough fairies, enough mons that can, like, fairy is the one true, like, okay, like, it resists both of its stabs, right? You have dark types, but, like, the only dark type I would say that, like, can check this thing is Mandibuzz. But even Mandibuzz has, like, that still takes 38 to 45 from a non-boosted close combat, might I add. You put that to +1, and you're already taking 2 KO'd from that move. And, Brave Bird is not killing you, or not even doing, like, any damage whatsoever. And that's before you, like, start creeping for certain Pokemon, which is a thing in Draft League format. Like, you obviously creep for certain Pokemon. I'm running out of breath, so let me just take a breath. All right, anyway, now that we're back on track. Mandibuzz is not, like, in my opinion, you can see, it's doing 35 to 42. So say you switch in your Mandibuzz, I make a good prediction. I'm the URSHIFU player. I decide to go for bulk up on the switch. I now go for my close combat, or maybe I bulk up again. If I bulk up again, I'm doing 76 to 90 with my CC, and that's Black Glasses boosted. And that is not even like boosting item. Like, I could be Life Orb, do, like, and probably kill, like, yeah. That's max HP, max defense Mandibuzz, by the way, with heavy duty boots. So it's like, and that's a one Pokemon. That is one Pokemon. That is my thing with the comparison with Draft League to what's it called? OU Smogon. I don't know why it has the grass thing in the background, but ignore that. Is that, yeah, you don't, like, you can prepare for certain mods, but not every person is going to have a beat to that mod. Another example, I would say, the person that won last season in our league, very good player. He lost to a team that had an URSHIFU, and I wish I had the replay to pull it up. I honestly just, I actually could pull it up later, but essentially, I could sum it up basically in saying that he was beaten essentially because he had a very bad matchup, and URSHIFU just destroyed his defensive core. And that is an issue because, like, yeah, it's a really good stall breaker, and yeah, like, there are mons that can beat URSHIFU, like, yeah, a faster, like a Tornadus, like, for example, Tornadus Therian can probably take a Wicked Blow and fire back with a Hurricane. That's a pretty good check. That's a pretty good check. But still, look how much Sucker Punch, a Life Orb Sucker Punch, is doing to Tornadus. Like, Wicked Blow kills, might I add, but that's besides the point. Like, Bandit, but like a Black Glasses boosted, a Sucker Punch is still doing 60 to 71, and you need to have enough speed to outspeed, but 50% with one move, with priority, and that's like the nail in the coffin for me. It's not only having this extremely devastating move that not only just destroys defensive cores, because there's no way to boost around it, right? Because if you're always critting, you're never going to be able to kind of alleviate that. Okay, well, he can, like, he's really strong move, but maybe I can just, like, Iron Defense up or something to beat it. And that was what I was kind of going through when I was prepping for this thing. I was like, what do I do to beat this thing? And I just basically had to be like, you know what? I basically just have to predict around it and just outspeed it, right? And there lies problem number 2. So problem number 1, Wicked Blow, extremely broken move. And with a set like Wicked Blow, Bulk Up, CC, and Sucker Punch, which is, in my opinion, the best set, because you have the breaking power of close combat, Wicked Blow, the prediction move of Bulk Up, and then Sucker Punch. Like, this literally, I know in OU, like, I'll get to that and after I say this, but number 1, Wicked Blow, Bulk Up, close combat, Sucker Punch, the power to go past like any, slower, maybe more bulky Pokemon with these moves. The prediction move of bulking up on turns you predict the switch, and then the priority of Sucker Punch. Basically, if you have, like, I think the best, in terms of overall what the best answer to this thing would be Clefable. Clefable is the most reliable check to URSHIFU, right? You have a mon that can take its hits on both fronts, and still fire back. But let's say instead of going for its best set, you instead, like, just opt for a just pure power set. this it doesn't switch in. Poison Jab is doing 63 to 75. And that's on Switch. So, you make a good prediction once, then you're basically screwed. Expert Belt, like, still killing the majority of the time. And if it's unaware to beat, like, a bulk up set, then it's essentially over. Actually, I'm curious to see if a bulk up, no, that wouldn't work, because you can just bulk up on that. Does this thing get any other boosting moves? I don't think it does. I should be more acquainted with that, but yeah, there you go. Like, it's not like there's very few checks to this thing. So not only is Wicked Blow and Bulk Up, so there's a few problems. Wicked Blow, extremely broken move. We've gone over that a ton of times. Also priority, which allows it to beat a lot of the mons that you would essentially try to check it with things like Tornadus. And notice how I'm saying check. There are no counters to Urshifu. There are no counters. There is Clefable, but even Clefable, like, on a switch, like, a counter is supposed to be able to switch in the like, almost 100% of the time, unless there's something whack. Like, I don't really see how a Poison Jab on the switch is whack. Like, even if you switch out to another mon, like, if you're a choice banded Urshifu, right, and I switch into my Clefable because I'm like, okay, like, this is the best answer, and even Wicked Blow is doing 35 to 42, and maybe, like, so if I make a good prediction, I go for a Poison Jab, your Clefable is at best 36%, and now you're like, oh shoot, I have to either switch, predicting him to just go for that other move because Clefable isn't fast enough to beat Urshifu. You're like, okay, I know it's banded based on that damage, let me switch out into my better check. If your opponent knows that you're going to switch, like, usually you can soft boil up, but you're not at full, number one, so it's still kind of got enough out of that exchange, and it gets basically a free switch into a mon that can, like, at least force Clefable out, maybe do some more damage, or, like, it can, what's what I'm looking for, or it can just stay in and Poison Jab again and kill you if you don't switch. So you're essentially either capitalizing on certain attacks, and yes, like, I know there's multiple sets you can run, and it's not only one mon you're dealing with, but I just think the limited amount of Pokemon that can switch into this thing are absolutely limited. And there is the argument to be made, okay, well, in OU there aren't as many lower tier mons that can potentially check Urshifu, because that would be, like, it would be unviable to run those mons, whereas in Draft League, you have those Pokemon that are going to be more readily available, and you're like, okay, well, maybe I can run my Aromatisse now because it does the same job Clefable can, and it can still go in there. So yes, there are other mons like fairies, but, like, even Aromatisse, like, we look at Aromatisse, it's still taking 62 to 73, so we have the same thing as Clefable. So that's kind of my point, is that, number one, Wicked Blow, broken ass move, great stabs in close combat and Wicked Blow, and then we have Sucker Punch for priority. So there's that. Now, and of course coverage, in terms of like U-turn, what if I just go for U-turn, like a safe attack, to take that out, maybe my Bandit or Shifu, I just want to go for U-turn. I don't need U-turn, but, like, I can just U-turn out and then force it out with something else and then chipping it over time. So basically your only real way of alleviating Urshifu is trying to break that down a little bit. And might I add, it also has Unseen Fist, which breakthrough protection, which I don't think I'm pretty sure that doesn't include sub. It might, but I'm pretty sure it's just protect. So you basically can't, like, leftover stall it out either. Which is another thing. I was like, wait, I can maybe, like, protect up and, like, try to beat it that way. No. And Urshifu is also not the only mon, so there's that as well. But let's look at its stats. So it's pretty weak on the Spidef side. It's got great HP and defense. It's essentially, like, it's mythical with its HP and defense. However, its speed is pretty low, and for at least like you basically have to run a Scarf if you want to hit things as hard with the Wicked Blow, but also still be able to viably outspeed things like maybe a Tornadus or something like that. But even then, Choice Scarf, what speed tier you're hitting, you're not going to outspeed those 100 base speed Scarfers. 322, that's outspeed, that's underspeeding Haxorus, Hydreigon. Um, Actually, I think Haxorus. I think Haxorus is the same speed as Urshifu if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it is. Um, but you're not outspeeding those 328s if they're Scarf, granted. But I think having that extra option of having Scarf is just kind of another kind of nail. Like, it's not really a detriment to Urshifu. It's not a mon that you have to be like. It's in the benefit of the player using Urshifu, not the benefit of the player playing Urshifu. Because the ability to run these certain sets on Urshifu add to its versatility. So it's not like, it's only going to be a banded Wicked Blow set, or a bulk up 3 attack set with Sucker Punch. It can run Scarf, it can run Band, it can run a more bulky setup set with like maybe leftovers. Even though I don't think that would be ideal, it's like, there are certain options that you can run for fun, but I think the most optimal set is obviously this one, not with leftovers, but like Black Glasses, Wicked Blow, Bulk Up, and Sucker Punch, and CC. But you have certain cover modes like U-turn. You have other moves to hit potential mons that can beat it. And Wicked Blow, in all things considered, only has 8 PP, so it's not like, okay, you can just like spam this move all game, breaking down defensive cores over time. So like maybe in that Amoonguss scenario, I bring in my Amoonguss, I go for maybe like a Synthesis and just keep synthesizing up. But what's to say he doesn't just bulk up on a turn, I go for Synthesis, and then I'm like, okay, shoot, I can't, like, now I'm in a really bad spot, because if he, like, maybe he doesn't kill me the next turn, but like, sure, he has less Wicked Blows, but he's still gonna like just completely dent my team to the point where some like a cleaner could come in and break through. So that's another issue. It has the ways to deal with checks like Clefable and Aromatisse or other fairy types, which seems to be the main answer to this thing. Not to mention, this thing gets like things like Iron Defense, Body Press. Like, what the hell, man? That's crazy. That is crazy. So you can run like some weird wicked, like that's weird as heck to me. And I don't want to make this video because I want to use this thing and I want to just show how absolutely broken it is. At least maybe it is, and maybe it isn't. Maybe it is not as broken as I think. However, I just firmly believe it is. Other things like Taunt to potentially stop niche ways of like maybe like stalling. Taunt could be cool for like setting up rocks. There's just so much this thing gets. Ice Punch for something like a Zapdos, even though I'm pretty sure Wicked Blow does more, but maybe you want to save PP, killing like a Gliscor or something, but like these are just like accessories. You would never actually really run those things. At least I wouldn't personally, but it's up to you. So Exhibit A, Wicked Blow. Just a reminder every time. Exhibit B, Sucker Punch, having priority. That is stab and relatively strong. Yes, obviously it is reliant on that move, being, like it only has APP. It's prediction reliant, obviously. Like someone could just set up a sub. However, like that Sucker Punch for just those straight up revenge killers, like Scarf Mons, things like Tornadus, maybe I do want to run that. Like, say you have Nasty Plot Torn, if I have Nasty Plot Torn, then I can just go for Nasty Plot, and then he Sucker Punches me. Oh, it doesn't work. Maybe I'm sub Nasty Plot, so maybe I sub, but, like that's the only way really around that. And then like he can just switch out. Like he's like, oh shoot, this is sub Nasty Plot Torn. It's just like, but what's to say that Urshifu wasn't like just gonna click Wicked Blow? So it's still prediction reliant, and I'm of the belief that I think it's in favor of the Urshifu player because sure, that person knows that they're sub Nasty Plot, but they don't know for sure. Maybe that person hasn't revealed Sucker Punch yet. It's like, and you only have 2 moves. I guess, some Nasty Plot Torn would be a pretty cool set. Probably could run that sometime, but it's like, what's to say they don't go into like their Mammoth line or something, and then Ice Shard, and then come back in with Urshifu, and the mind games start again. So it's like, it destroys defense. It has the ability to destroy offense given prediction. And I think a prediction that favors the player that is using Urshifu, and um, it's like there's not necessarily counterplay really, because you're just basically killing everything that is like slower, and the mons that you aren't killing can't switch in on you reliably. It's like there's no real way around it. Like I think I was talking to a friend about this, Akeem. We kind of compared it to Kieran Black from Generation 6, you right? And I think it's a viable comparison because Kieran Black in Generation 6 obviously didn't have Dragon Dance, didn't have really any setup at all. It just had Dragon Claw, it had like the standard moves, it had that Bolt Beam coverage, but it had to kind of balance the special attack and attack. It was still relatively slow, but it was pretty bulky, so it could still kind of take a hit. Obviously, there's some give and takes with Urshifu. Obviously, Urshifu has a 4 times weakness in Fairy, given. It has the flying weakness, so it has Fairy flying, but it's not weak to Bug. It's resistant to Psychic. Dark Fighting is, in my opinion, very solid defensive and offensive typing, because it's also resistant to some key types, such as, obviously, Psychic, like I said. Rock is a big one, because Kieran Black, huge Rock's weakness. Obviously, Heavy Duty Boots has alleviated that a little bit, but taking 6% from Rocks on Urshifu is amazing. Like, that is great, because you basically are at full, essentially. And you're not really having to rely on them chipping you down with Rocks, because Kieran Black could just come in on Rocks and be like, oh, I'm at 76%. Oh, shoot. Now I just have to, like, either find a way to roost up later or just kind of attack until I die eventually. So it's like the switching around with Urshifu is a lot more easy. And again, with Kieran Black, like, its max attack is, its minimum attack is better than Urshifu's like standard attack, but it didn't have a move like Wicked Blow. There was no move on Kyurem that was just absolutely like, I can just break through. Like, the best move it had was Outrage, and that confuses you if you had a Fairy. Screw what Urshifu has to deal with fairies like Poison Jab and Wicked Blow. That's still doing at least like 30%. Outrage is just completely stops you, and then a fairy comes in and goes, oh shoot, I can just negate that and just kill your Kyurem. So there's that. And number 2, Kyurem is actually slightly slower. That 317 speed tier is so nice to be out of for Urshifu. You are like outspeeding something like a Yuxi, which could do something like maybe Toxic you, or just something like that could at least just speed tie you and have that as an out. Be like, okay, I can speed tie this Pokemon. Let me try to do that, and that creates a whole other can of worms. But then you have Urshifu, who's like, oh, I can just outspeed that number, like, regardless, and then I can just, like, speed creep you. Because running Jolly over Adamant is not that big a deal, because the damage is still extremely high with Wicked Blow. Even with no boosting item, it's just insane. And not to mention, something like a Kyurem, it had no setup. This thing has no setup. There was no way for this thing to really break past anything. I might have gotten, I can't recall. Maybe there is, and I'm being dumb, but, this thing basically just had to roost and Fusion Bolt all day. Sure, Urshifu doesn't have reliable recovery outside of Drain Punch, but, Kyurem is getting chipped a lot more than Urshifu, so I think it's a give and take. And not only that, Kyurem Black had to try to, like, balance its special and physical attacks, so by that, you'd have to really sacrifice a defense in order to do that. So I think its defense is even like slightly it's pretty comparable to something like an Urshifu, because that 194 special defense is it's a little bit higher than that special defense on Urshifu, but the bulk, given the fact that Kyurem has a lot of weaknesses, is definitely something to consider. But anyway, that's Kyurem from Generation 6, which I think is a good comparison, but I honestly think Urshifu is better because of the fact that there are still switch-ins to Kyurem Black, aka fairies are a very solid example. You had a fairy like Florges, which, obviously Ironhead was doing a significant amount of damage, but, you could come in with your faster fighting type and just completely wall it, like no priority on Kyurem Black. Maybe something like a Florges, right? That prediction, Ironhead it's, Jolly Ironhead doing Life Orb, not killing Floor, just similar to Poison Jab on, what's it called? Urshifu, but, still. But what if, like, Urshifu bulks up or something? It's just like, I don't know. So there are some certain scenarios where Kyurem is better, but in my opinion, that Wicked, like, I've kind of stated what I've already said with Wicked Blow and Sucker Punch, and not to mention having setup and bulk up, which in my opinion is really cool because it kind of negates all those Brave Bird users like Corviknight or something that could potentially just like revenge kill it straight off the bat, because it's boosting out of being able to do that. And there aren't that many physical fairies, so it doesn't really alleviate that problem, but you still have, if they're not bulky enough to live a +1 poison jab from like maybe a X-Propel or Life Orb or Shifu, then they're in for a real treat, because like, what do? You go into your faster Pokemon that has to try to take a +1 Sucker Punch or try to play around it. It's like, that is extremely weird. And the really funny thing is that the other Urshifu form, Urshifu Rapid Strike, is really bad. I do not like this thing in Draft League at all. I think it is a sorry excuse for what Urshifu Single Strike is, because Surging Strikes, while a cool move, just gets completely negated by Rocky Helmet, and then you have to run like protective pads, and now you're just completely screwed. Because now you're like, okay, now I get no boosting item. I'm still, Urshifu, and that defensive typing is not doing it any justice, because and now we have fighting as our background because I accidentally dragged that over. That's cool. Anyway, yeah, so same coverage, just lacking that just super ultra powerful move with Surging Strikes and stuff, because it's doing less damage. So yeah, that's Urshifu Rapid Strike. Yeah, it's not really that good of a mon in Draft League. I actually would beg to say it's just absolutely horrible. Like, I actually have never seen it put in really that much work, and for as high of a point mon as it is in a lot of Draft Leagues, it I don't think really deserves it. But anyway, that's besides the point. It does have Aqua Jet though, so I guess I was kind of wrong about the priority, but it's like slightly worse priority in what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. I just lost my train of thought. But anyway, yeah. Basically, to sum up this video, because I know it's getting long, Urshifu, in my opinion, is broken in Draft League. And to kind of end this video off, I've heard the argument that OU and Draft League are not comparable. Now, obviously, I'm not like trying to throw shade at anyone here, because it's a viable argument, right? Like, oh, they're two different formats, there's OU and then there's Smogon, and there isn't really, or OU and Draft League, and there isn't really any correlation between the two, because OU players and Smogon players are different, and Smogon players, like, barely any of them play Draft League. I don't know that many off the top of my head. I know there's Finchinator, Pokeaim, people like that, like signature ladder players. Like, you would consider Smogon players that post that stuff. I would consider MV, I guess, like a ladder player, I guess, I don't know. But it's really just kind of different what you find enjoyable. And I think that a lot of people find Draft League more enjoyable than ladder, just because of how boring the ladder can be sometimes, So it's like, yeah, those people that find ladder interesting don't really play Draft League as much, because they have to focus a lot of their time into laddering, and just doing that and kind of understanding the metagame, and that's kind of what they find enjoyable. So there are some crossover there, but to say that they're that different, I would say is a little not short-sighted, because I think it's a viable argument, but I think that there's more crossover than people think. Because something like Urshifu on the ladder, right, you're still going to have these top-tier mons, and the difference between OU and Draft League is that you are, specifically trying to counter certain mons that you think your opponent will bring, and but the similar idea of bringing a holistic team to beat their team. You want to bring the best things you can, so you're going to opt more for your top mons, and you're not going to bring, your low tier mons every week. or at least the majority of them, because of the fact that they're significantly worse. They're lower point value for a reason. Unless all of them do extremely well versus your opponent team and your top ones do not, you're going to opt for your top ones instead, unless you're memeing around or you have significant holes in your team, which is, I think, another whole other argument in and of itself. But say you have them on like Thwacky and you're lacking priority, but you're like, oh, Thwacky has Grassy Glide, so let me just bring Thwacky in. You have a lacking of priority on your team, and maybe Thwacky kind of gives you that availability to do that. Not that Thwacky is a bad mon, because for where it is, I think it's pretty solid, fun Pokemon to use. However, to say that you're bringing that, beat a lot of these top tier mons, you could bring a Thwacky to an OU game, it would still have some success. It's obviously outclassed by Rillaboom, but, you wouldn't have as much success in Draft League because you know what your opponent is bringing. But if your opponent has a well-constructed team, maybe they have a Torn, you're like, okay, that kind of detracts from bringing that. Maybe they have like a Moltres, so you're like, okay, obviously having both of those would be a little counterintuitive, but you get the point. Maybe they have a good Steel type, maybe they have a good Flying type. You're like, okay, I'm not going to bring Thwacky. Same thing goes for Ladder. You're not going to bring Thwacky because things like Ferrothorn exist, Heatran exist, even though they have ways to get around that. But, you can bring Thwacky, and it can have some success in some scenarios. But just like Draft League, it's not going to be the most optimal to bring that instead of something that would just better fit the spot on the team. You can only bring 6 mons. Obviously the pool is a lot smaller for Draft League than it is in OU, where you can literally bring anything and everything's on the table, so your teams have to be a lot more holistic. But I think Draft League is just a more confined version of OU. It's essentially like a very squeezed down version of OU, and kind of all the tiers at once, because you're not only trying to check the top tier mons, you're trying to check the lower tier threats as well. So it's kind of like an amalgamation of all the Smogon tiers crunched into 12 to 8 to 12 mons. However mons you're using in your Draft League, that's what it is. And so I think the comparisons are still viable between OU and Draft League. And since Urshifu is extremely, extremely good in OU, and I really couldn't tell you what mons would be effective in dealing with it. Yeah, sure, you have Skarmory, but the same arguments goes for Corviknight. Sure, you have Pokemon like Flame Body mons. Let's look through the list. Yeah, Drapion, I guess. Maybe can take a Wicked Blow. You have other mons that can take hits from Urshifu. Maybe a Milotic. But, you still have that same problem of just being able to blow past whatever the hell it wants to. And I've already kind of said this a million times, but this Pokemon is extremely hard to counter in terms of, I think it's impossible to counter, but in terms of defense, in terms of offense, and predictions are favoring the Urshifu player. So that's kind of my argument here. Hopefully that made sense, and hopefully I'm pretty sure, I'm actually proud of myself. I really thought I was pretty coherent in this video. So we're going to put this out there. Hopefully, I really want to know what you guys think about it. Obviously, there will be some discussion and, some debate. I do expect people to disagree. That is completely fine. I just wanted to get my opinion out there, because I think in a heated debate, one-on-one, it's a lot more, at each other's throat. That's kind of how I am. I like putting my thoughts together in a way that I can kind of put them out there, and then someone can kind of talk about it. So whereas it's not like on the spot, like people are just going for like different things, not really listening to the other person. So yeah, there we go. That is my argument for Urshifu. We can talk about other Pokemon like Blaziken and other ban-worthy mons that are on the table, but for now, this is my kind of put out there. But my laptop is screaming at me because it is overheating like crazy. It's actually not that hot, but we're going to go ahead and wrap this video up. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. It was pretty long, but a lot of things to unwrap here. So that being said, hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you in maybe the next video. I don't know how long that will be, but I'll see you guys. Strokefish out. Peace.